Hey everyone, this is Craig, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create this donation form using Elementor and WS Form. It's a great form plugin that allows you to do a lot of different things. I really like it. I've been using it a lot over the last year or so. And I want to show you how to make this cool donation form. You could really do any kind of donation form. This one happens to be a very specific form for political candidates and elected officials who have a very special need related to getting information about the donor's employer. In the world of politics, you need to know where the money's coming from. And in some places, it's actually a legal requirement. If a donation is made over a certain amount of money, you need to get that person's employer because they want to know which companies are donating to which candidates. It's a transparency thing. So what you'll see here is a standard donation amount. You can drop down, put another amount in there. So I could put maybe something that's different than what you see here, maybe like a $1,000 donation. You can check whether it's recurring or not recurring, and you could change that checkbox. And then you continue over to the second tab of the form, which is really nice, loads automatically. And you see it carries the donation amount through from the first tab and all the donor's information. And then down below, you'll see here, there's some buttons here, and that's related to the person's employment, which then drops down and captures information about the employer's name, the person who's making that donation, things like that. So these are some additional fields that are required when you're doing political donations. If you're using, instead of something like ActBlue, if you're using a straight Stripe or PayPal or something like that, and you're doing it directly through your website, is a great way to do it using WordPress, Elementor, and WS Form. So in this tutorial, we're going to go through how to create this donation form and how to put it onto your site and make it look great. So we're going to do a little bit of custom styling. Let's jump into it right now. Okay, so here we are in the administrative area of the website, and there are a few plugins that you'll need to make this work. Obviously, you'll need Elementor, and you'll also need WS Form. WS Form has a free version, and they have a pro version. In this particular version, I'm running the pro version, so we have that installed. And really, that's all you need to make this work. So we're going to dive right into the donation form here. And what I'll do is I'll open this up in another tab so we can take a look at it. And here's that form loaded. You'll see that it's just a simple name donation up here. We have two tabs. The first tab covers the amount, and the second tab covers the contact info, which you'll see here. We also have some conditional logic related to the amount. If someone clicks one of the buttons for other donation, you'll see that. So that triggers down an additional box that you can enter a custom amount. We have some conditional logic based on whether somebody is currently employed or retired or a student, and that drops down the required employer address field. And then we have some conditional elements related to recurrence, whether somebody chooses if this should recur on a monthly or a quarterly type of fashion. So we've got that there. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of custom styling that we want to put in place just to make this all look good with the page and form. So let's head back over to the main donation area, and we'll start one from scratch. So we'll quickly add a new form here, and it's going to drop us down into the WS Form area where you can add new. You could choose to start with a template, and for example, generally speaking, the donation templates are in the e-commerce area. Now, this doesn't really get us what we need, so I generally like to start blank and have everything clean from the start. So that's what we're going to do here. Just click the blank item. WS Form is going to go through its little machinations there, and we are presented with this form. We have one tab here, and then we have some sections. So right off the top, let's just call this donation. And I'm going to name mine Donation V2 just so we can keep it separate from the original donation form that I had. And we will flip back and forth just to look at the original form here, get the fields, the tabs, things like that. So the first one really is the donation amount. So we'll put amount there in the top. And right off the bat, we're going to create a second tab, and this is going to be for the contact information. So let's put contact info there. We're going to hide these tabs on the front end anyway, so it doesn't matter what they say for the front end. This is really just for your purposes administratively in the back end. Now, one of the peculiarities with WS Form is that whenever you make any field changes, you need to save those field changes. So if we're editing here in actual fields, we need to make sure that we hit save. So when we actually start dragging and dropping and changing parameters and settings of fields, you need to remember to click the little blue button down here, which is a save button. This is really just a list of fields. But once we start working, you'll see that save button pop, and we're going to want to make sure to do that. There's really no harm in publishing this form right now because it's nowhere to be found. So that will also go through the process of saving it. So you can do that occasionally, and you'll see me also do that occasionally in this video because I want to make sure we're not losing any of the changes. Sometimes as I'm working in a WS form, I'll make a few changes and forget to hit save, and then you have to go back and redo that work, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but the benefits of WS form kind of outweigh that peculiarity with the save button thing. So just watch out for that as you move along. All right, so let's hop back over to the front end and take a look at the form. So here we have a couple buttons here with the words donation amount. This is a required field. And this is actually done through a class of WSF button. And we click on these, turns them into these little pill buttons here. So, and then we have a let this donation recur, that's a checkbox. And then we have a continue field. So let's go ahead and add those to our form. So over here, we have a radio button, and this would be controlled by price, right? Because this is an e-commerce field. So it's not a regular radio, it's going to be a price radio. So we're going to drag that in. And then we have a checkbox, right, to drag that in. Now let's hop back to the front again and take a look. Now you'll notice if I click any of these are for the set numbers, and if we go outside the set number with other, it drops down this additional price field, which allows user entry. So that would be great if we got a $777 million donation. That would be interesting. So let's go back and let's put that in here as well. And that's just an additional regular price input. So we'll just drop that here below the radio. And then we have the checkbox down below. And then if we look back over to the front page again, we have a continue button, which is essentially the previous and next button, which gets us over to the next tab. So let's just drop that in there, and we'll leave that for now. If you want, you can again click publish and then preview this real quick, and it's going to preview it in another tab for us. Now what you'll notice is this does not take the form like what we can see here, and that's okay. We're going to add some custom classes which will fix some of that up, and then some of it will never show properly in the preview because there is custom styling involved, not necessarily on the preview. So we will be finishing it with some custom styling toward the end, and I'll get into exactly the code that I'm using to make that happen. So for now, you can see we have our radio and we have price, and this is getting a pretty good start. So let's head back to the form and we'll start editing these fields to make it show the way we want. So to make the price radio button show up as fields, or I'm sorry, to make the price fields show up as buttons, we're going to use a class, and this is a class that is included inside WS Form, which is actually really nice. A lot of other form plugins will require you to do a lot of custom styling, but we can get pretty close to what we need. And we're going to click on the settings, the gear icon here for the field settings on price radio, and then we're going to go to the advanced tab, and then we're going to slide down over here. I like to put names on these, right? We could do a wrapper, which will wrap the entire field. We don't need that necessarily right here, but for the actual field itself, we will use the class WSF, and we will say dash button, right? And then here's where we need to save this, right? So if we click save, and then let's just preview this real quick again, and you'll notice it turns those radios into tabs for us there, which is exactly what we want. Now, there are a few other settings. If we go back to basic, we can show the label, and instead of saying price radio there, we're going to say donation amount, and we're going to require this, and we don't need any help text, but down here on layout, we're going to change this to a grid, and I like grid better than horizontal. If we choose horizontal, it's going to put them in a row, which is nice, and it'll look good. But we want to use grid here because we want this to follow a grid pattern as this goes from a desktop view to a responsive like mobile view or vice versa. So you'll notice here, down here, we have what these grids look like in WSF starting from a mobile first. So you'll see on a mobile device, everything is full width, right? And as we get bigger, it stays full width, but we can move these things around if we want and say we wanted to put two fields next to each other. We'll get into that when we do the name and other contact information, cell phone, email. They'll be next to each other rather than all in a row. But once we are in basic on the donation amount field and we choose grid, it gives us the ability to put these into columns, right? So if we take a quick look on the front end, we see we have here, each one is a third, right? A third of the width. So what we want to do is come over here, and for the extra small width, this would be for a phone, we want them to be full width. That's totally fine. For small width, maybe we're going to do two columns. We want to separate just two buttons, right? And then for medium width, this would be like laptop. We want to do 3 columns, which is 1/4 width. And it's going to continue inheriting that as you get larger, large width, extra large width. So we can save that and run a preview again, and you'll notice that now our buttons are in 3 columns. Now, there's a lot of spacing between here, and that's because it's taking the preview sort of out of context. This entire page is just showing you the preview of the form, when in reality, our form is going to be constrained only to one side or one column on this page. So it's going to be a lot tighter than what you would see, say, in this preview. But it does give us the idea that this is, in fact, in a grid. So we're on the right track here. So let's go back to donation amount, and let's head over to the radios button so we could add some buttons here. Now we know we're going to need 6 buttons, so let's just add 2 more, and that gives us 6 across the board. And we're going to change these names from product 1, product 2, product 3, and we're going to put numbers here. So let's do $25 there, let's do $50 there, $100 there, let's do $250 here, let's do $500. And let's make this one other. And then the price here, we're just going to use the numbers. We don't need the dollar signs. So we're going to do 50 there, 100 there. And these are going to match the labels, of course. 250, 500. And do make sure that they match the label, right? Because if they don't, then you have issues. Someone thinks they're donating 25, but the actual amount being transmitted to Stripe or PayPal, wherever you're processing, is a different amount, which could be confusing to the donor and problematic. So make sure that your numbers actually do match and they're getting what they think they're getting. So that's it there, pretty good. You don't have to mess with any of the other variables there, and we'll just again save and close that, and then we'll preview this on the front end. You'll see there we go. So now you can see we have 4 across the top. So let's just go back and double check the settings we have for this. And here's 3 columns. Let's match that to 4 columns. Whoops, sorry. That was set to inherit. Default 12, small columns 2, 2, 2. We want to make this 4, sorry. So that we get 1/3 width. And that should do it. And let's give that a quick preview. There we go. We've got 3 buttons across the top, which is 1/4 width is how WS Form is computing that. So to get those 3 columns across the top, we want to use the settings just to go back into donation amount. We'll be using 4 columns, right? So it's putting them in 4 columns, which is 1/3 width there. So that's how that's handled. Okay, now let's jump over to the price drop-down field. And here's where we're going to run into our first conditional, right? Because we want, let's take a look at this preview here. You'll see that the price button is always visible here. So we want this price, additional price drop down to only open when we click the other button. We want to give people a few choices and then let them add their own custom amount. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into the conditional area here. Well, actually, before we do that, let's change the name here. So instead of price, let's call it other amount, because that's what they would be donating, an amount other than what we've got there. And let's make sure that we save that. Then let's jump up here into the conditional logic, and we're going to put our first conditional in here. So let's click this plus button, and this is a new condition, so we'll call this other amount. And what we want to do is we want the other amount to drop down if the donation amount selected is other. So we're going to say if donation amount, and we want a specific one here, checked value equals other. You can also select one of these rows checked, and then you could use a drop down, and we could say other. So that's the if statement. Then, so we could add this plus here, if then, we're going to make the other amount visible. Set visibility, visible. Now you'll notice once you set visibility, and this is one of the beautiful things I love about WS Form, it's so intuitive, it automatically suggests that if you're setting it to be visible now, then the else condition is probably that you want it hidden. So it automatically adds that for you. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. So essentially what this is saying is if other row is checked inside of the donation amount price radio, then take the other amount price custom field and set it to be visible. Otherwise, if it's one of the other buttons checked under donation amount, make sure that it's hidden. So let's save that. We're going to close that, and let's do a quick preview. So you'll notice that that price field, that custom field, is now gone. And if we select 25, still gone, 50, 100, all these things are still gone. But when we click on the other, it drops it down, and it lets us enter something in there. So that's the exact functionality that we need. Let's head back to the form, and let's work on our checkbox now, which handles the recurrence for the donation. So here we are with checkbox, and let's rename this. Let this donation recur. We could set this either to just a simple name here. We want to show the label. And let's go over, we can leave the rest of this the same here. And let's go over to checkbox. Right now we have 3 options. We only need 1. And let's name this one monthly, like that. And that's really all we need to do there. So let's go ahead and save this, and then let's preview that. So here we have let this donation recur monthly. Great, so we can check that box. And let's put a little bit of conditional work here. Actually, we'll do that in the next step because we need to let people know when they go to the next step where we start collecting their information, we need to remind them the amount they selected and that it's not just a one-time donation, that it would recur monthly, because that could be obviously a big financial difference there. So we want to carry that through to the next step and remind them what's happening when we do that. And let me show you what that looks like on the actual form. So you'll notice if we click, say, $100 and move forward, you'll see it just says, hey, your donation total is $100. But if they were to select let it recur monthly and they move forward, we give them this notification, this warning here that, hey, it's recurring monthly. You know, right now we've got that at the kind of a green success image, but you could turn that to red, yellow, warning, you know, make it bright. You could move this field over, put the recurring monthly next to it. You could do all sorts of things with this, but we're going to leave that here for now. And just kind of give them a notification that, hey, this is recurring monthly. So that's kind of what we're going after there, right? So we'll build that into the conditionals when we get into the contact info on the next page. So the only thing we have left here to change is to, let's make sure we save that work we did there with monthly, but let's change next and let's do something like continue. Maybe we'll put a couple carets there to let them know to move forward there. And let's hit save and close, and then we can preview that on the front end, and sure, there we go, continue. And again, we'll get back to all this styling at the end when we start working with these buttons and make sure that they're done the right way. For now, we're going to start working on the contact info, which is the second tab in the form, and let's do that now. So if we look at the form again, on the second page is where we go to the contact info. So someone clicks a button like $100, and they click over. And you'll see here, we do have this message here, recurring monthly, like I mentioned before, because this is clicked. So let's just leave that there for now. So on the second tab, we'll see that there's basically a reprint of the donation total. So it carries through from the first page to the second to remind them what that amount is. And then here we have this message that it is recurring monthly. Then we're collecting first name, last name, email address, cell phone, and home address. So let's go ahead and just start with those first. Head back to the form. And we'll put these into the second tab, which is the Contact Info tab. All right, so let's start by heading over to the Contact Info tab, and then what we want to do is we want to put the previous tab here. This will allow us to go back to the previous section. And then we can put the donation total field, and that, let's go look at the price fields here for the exact one that we need. Here in e-commerce, we have a cart total. So let's put that here. And let's look at putting in some of the additional contact information that we need. And let's see, so we have the previous, we have the donation total, then we have a message. So that's going to be done with just some custom HTML content here. So let's just add that here. We'll come back to that in a moment. First, last, email, cell phone. So let's start dropping those fields in. So we've got a text for first name, last name. We want email, we want cell phone. Then we're going to use address 1, 2, city, state, and zip. So we'll do text for address 1, text for address 2, text for city. We will do a drop down for state. So we'll just put that select there. And then the zip, we will also do text. So let's name these to make sure that we have these. Give a quick publish just to save those where they are. And then instead of cart total, we'll call this donation total. And we'll just leave that there for now. And then let's make sure we save that. For HTML, we will put, since we only had one option, we'll just say recurs monthly and put an exclamation point there, or I think we put recurring monthly, so let's do that, recurring monthly. We'll just leave that, and let's save that there. And then we have underneath that first name, last name, so let's make this first name. Now we are going to hide these labels. And we have to require this. So let's use the placeholders. First name. Save that. Come down to this. We'll change this to last name. Require it. Don't show the label. Put a placeholder in place. Save that. For email, we'll call this email address. And we'll make that the placeholder. Make sure we don't show the label. We'll save that. For phone, we're going to call this cell phone. We don't need to require the cell phone. Put that in the placeholder. Now, in some locations, you do have to give them a disclosure. If you're going to collect their cell phone and potentially send them text messages, then you would want to let them know that you have the potential to send them text messages. You can do that with some help text below, or you can do that with a checkbox, hey, you're opting in, and then do a default text box. So you need to check to see if that's required in your area. If it is, you'll need to add that here. And an easy way to do that is with the help text. Excuse me. So let's save that. Cell phone, after cell phone, we're going to do address 1. And let's put that down in the placeholder. Save that. Over here would be address 2. That in the placeholder and save that. The second address is not required, but we need to make sure that we require the address 1. Okay, and then over here for city, we need to require that, and let's put city here and there. And then this one is state, which we also need to require. And let's save that. We're going to come back to state in a moment. And over here under text, let's call this zip code. And let's put that in the placeholder and save that. Now, WS Form has a really nice feature that allows us to do some auto completions here. So let's go back to state. And we're going to make this a nice state dropdown. Now, for the first row placeholder, blank for none, select is perfect. So it'll just show them this select, and then they'll see a drop down. We don't have to worry about autocomplete. Select to is nice if you want to make it searchable, but if it's a simple list of states, people pretty much know that's going to be alphabetized. So if we head on over to options, we could pull from a data source. So, and that's what we want to do here. So let's clear out these options and let's pull from a data source. So let's go here and let's do preset. And then it's going to give us options for a preset list of options. And if you select this, you will see all different types of options. Under geography, you can click states US. And that's going to pop that in there. And then you can click get data, and that will populate all the states. Now let's give this a quick save, and then let's publish this, and let's see how this looks in preview to see how that drop down looks. So here's our first page or first section of the form. Let's head over to the contact info. We see the previous button up top. We see the donation total here. First name, last name, all this good stuff. Down here for state, right, we didn't put a placeholder in place, so we may want to change that. But if we click on that, you'll see it gives us the full state names, which is nice, and they're in alphabetical order, which is great. So if we were to click on that, it's putting the whole state in there, which is also fine. Great. So that has what we want. Let's head back on over here, and let's go back to the state field. And instead of saying select, we could maybe say just state. And that'll let us, or we could even say select state if that's easier, a little bit more obvious there. And that's fine, so let's save that. Now, the same thing goes for zip code. We can format this as a zip code so that people don't enter the wrong number of numbers, or they're not sure the first part of the zip code, the last part of the zip code. So under zip code, again, we want to make sure that that's required. We do not need to show the label. Then head over to the advanced section of the WS form settings. We're going to scroll down and we're looking for input mask, and this is going to help us mask this field. Now you can put the regex here, or the characters, that would be the input mask, or you can click this little option here and it makes it super easy for adding either a zip code, or if you need the zip +4, you can put that. We're just going to select zip code and it shows us the mask right there. So when we, and you could do the same for pattern too. If you scroll down toward the bottom, you can click on zip code, and it basically puts the pattern so that it makes sure that it's set the right way. So let's save that, and we'll publish that, and then we'll do a quick preview. So if we come down here, we see city, state. You don't necessarily need select state. We could just leave it as state. So you select that, and then in the zip code drop down, it's going to give us just the right number. So if we put 33333, notice how it doesn't let us enter any more information. So it's restricting just to those 5 numbers. So that's great. And if we try to add letters, it doesn't work. It's looking for a number, which is perfect because we want to restrict this just to US. Now let's just real quick click on the previous. Let's click 50, and let's say that, let's continue. Notice we're not checking monthly, even though we say this is recurring monthly, right? And we'll leave that there, and the 50 carries through. So we need to set up the conditional to deal with this recurring monthly. So let's do that next. Now, as I'm looking at this recur monthly, this is an HTML message. We actually wanted to do that as a warning message. So let's just go back to the form. And here where we have this set as an HTML field, let's just get rid of that. And we're actually going to bring in a message field, which is a separate type of field in WS form. So let's go to message, and let's drop that right beneath the donation total, and then let's edit that field. And this is where we can say recurring monthly. And we have a couple different options. It's information, warning, danger, success. I'll click success there. I believe that's the one that makes it green. So let's save and close that. Let's publish it and then preview the form. And there we go. We get the green recurring monthly, which is nice. I like that. So let's head back, and now let's take care of the recurrence there. So where we have message, let's call that recurrence message, and let's save that. Now let's go to the conditionals field, and let's add a new conditional, and let's call this recurrence message. And what we want to do is we want to set this field to show if the recurrence checkbox in the amount section is selected. So we're going to look at our first tab, which is the amount tab, and here are our fields, and let this donation recur if that is checked. And we're going to say monthly. Then add an option here. We want to go down to recurrence message, and we're going to set the visibility to visible. And again, it automatically suggests that it would be hidden unless it's checked, which is exactly what we want. So let's save that, and let's publish that. And then again, let's take a quick preview here. So we'll see here, it's no longer there, that message, and it won't be there until we click the recurrence box. And then if we continue, now you'll see it's there. So that's working the way we would expect it to. We've checked the donation total. If we click 25 there, that's working the way we would expect it to. And it looks like we're in good shape there. So that covers the recurrence message. And now we want to cover what this employer box looks like, because in campaign finance, if the donation is over a certain amount, you need to collect employer information. But what most candidates do is collect the employer information anyway, so that they don't miss it and run afoul of the finance rules and regulations. So they usually just collect it anyway, and that happens by looking at this here. So here's how this box works. If someone is not employed, they just simply select no, and they don't have to enter any additional information. If they are retired, they just simply designate retired, and they don't have to enter employer information. If they are a student, they select student, and they don't have to enter any employment information, even if they happen to be employed, like a part-time job or things like that. Their student status basically is what is recorded there. What does drop down is a set of employer-related address fields if they are currently employed. So they would select yes, and that's when fields drop down for the employer name, which would be the company name, the address, and some additional information for city, state, zip. So let's go ahead and complete that now. So we're going to head back over to our form. Here we are in the form, and let's add the information for those. Essentially, it's just a copy of the address fields. So let's go ahead and drop in a couple of those. Let's save and close out of this conditional information, and let's start adding these address fields. Now, we've already done the work for state and zip, so let's just real quick duplicate those. So we're going to change the name. So instead of zip code, we're going to call this employer zip code. And we'll do the same for placeholder so that people know exactly what they're adding. Let's save that. And then we'll do the same for state. We will copy that, and we will change this to employer state. And there we go. And we could probably just click state there. I think they're going to get the point where they are. And let's do the same for city. Duplicate that. And these are really just text box here. So let me just do this real quick. Change this to employer. Great. And let's duplicate the address field. And let's edit that. And let's duplicate the first address field. And save and close that. Now we just need to move these into place. So we have employer state should be under, let's move this down to zip code. Employer city should be by employer state. By adding the word employer to these, it makes it a little bit easier to find them where they need to be. So we have all the regular addresses together and then all the employer addresses together. Then we're going to make these conditionals based on that button field. So let's go ahead and style up that button field. that looks like this. It's a currently employed with this message. So before we do it, let's just grab this message, and then we head back over to the form, and we can drop that in there. All right, so let's head back to the form, and let's drop a regular radio button in. That's how we're going to control that employment status drop down. So we're going to put that right before the questions related to employer address. So let's go and edit that radio button, and the label here is going to be currently employed. If I can figure out how to spell, we will require that, and we are going to show the label. And then for the help text, we'll drop that text in that we copied over from the form related to the campaign finance law requirements. And then in terms of the layout, we're going to change this to a grid. We want this to show up in grid view as well. So we can set these here. For example, we want to make this across 4 different choices. I think that's going to be tough for phone view, so we could leave that as full width, or maybe we do 2 columns, that kind of thing, like that. And then for this is like a tablet view, we could probably go to 4 columns for the tablet view, and the rest of those as well. So let's save that, publish that, and then let's take a look at that in preview and see how that looks. So we have 1, 2, 3 across, and let's change on the item. We need to add a class to the individual fields, and again we could do WSF-button, and that will turn those into buttons. And let's go over to the radio section, and let's change our choices to yes, no, retired, and student. And then we'll save that, and then do another quick preview. So here we've got 3 columns for those buttons. Let's just change the button formatting there, and over on basic here, here. So 3 columns, 1/4 width, and the rest will inherit, and we should be good to go there. Publish it, take a quick preview. There we go. We have our 4 buttons across the top. Great. Now let's take care of the conditional here. So what we want to do is go to the conditionals, and we want to add a condition related to the currently employed being checked. So let's just call this employment status, and let's start working on if employment, if currently employed is checked, right? Because if it's not checked, we don't need to collect it. If they're retired, we don't need to collect their employer info. And if they're a student, we don't need to collect. So the only one on which we would need to base our conditionals is the yes version. Into the then side of things, we will set visibility on employer address. So we're going to select employer address. We're going to say set visibility to visible. And then again, it automatically adds the else condition and assumes it's to be set for non-visible, or in this case, hidden. Same thing. So let's add the other fields. And you'll see as we do this, it highlights them yellow so you can see what the conditionals are doing. We need to do employer address number 2. So we'll scroll down, and employer address number 2, we're going to set the visibility, visible. And you'll notice it adds it here for hidden too. So we'll just keep going. And we'll add the city, set visibility, visible. Then we will add the state, set visibility, visible. And the final one is the zip code, set visibility, visible. Now, I also realized that we need the employer name, which we hadn't added as a field. So let's just save our work here in the conditional. And then let's go back and add a text area here for the employer name. So we're going to name this employer name. We don't need to show the label, but we will require the field, and we'll drop that into the placeholder. And let's save that. Let's go back to our conditional, and let's edit the employment status, and that's another one that we can add as a field here to drop down. So we'll go down and find that employer name, set the visibility to visible. If we want, we can move that to the top of the list, since technically it is the first one in that item list. Hit save, hit publish, and then let's look at our preview here. And you'll see nothing shows up below that until we start clicking. So if we click no, nothing happens. Retired or student, nothing happens. But if we click yes, those fields drop down. And that's exactly what we need. Now, we haven't messed with any styling here, which is okay. And the next thing we need to do is add our submit button, because technically the donation can be finalized at this point. So let's go ahead and add that submit button and start to wrap up before we do the styling of the form. So head back over to the field area here in WS Form and just type submit or sub in there, and you'll be able to drag the submit button down toward the bottom of the form. And that's really the last field that we need to worry about. We'll change this name to complete donation or something to that effect. And we're all set at that point. You can save this form out and then publish the form just to make sure those changes are locked in. And you'll find we have a complete form. We have created 2 tabs in this form, which technically are hidden, but the first tab is the amount information for the donation, and then the second tab is contact info, where they enter their name, address, all the things you need for a donation and billing, along with the employer information. We've also added some conditional fields, which control the visibility of certain fields under certain conditions. So again, this form is complete. Nice job. Congratulations. All that's left to do is go ahead and style it. So let's work on that now. Now, we've been looking at the preview of the form this entire time, and that's not the place we want to do the styling. So we're going to want to put this on a regular page. In this case, we're using Elementor, and then we're going to add this form there and then look at this in the standard preview mode, just the way a regular donor would see it on the front end of the site. And that's the best way to complete the styling. So let's go ahead and create a new page in Elementor, put this on there, and we'll style it up from there. So let's head over to Pages and then click Add New. And let's just call this donation, and we can publish that. And then let's edit with Elementor. Now, when we're creating a donation page, we want it to be distraction free. We don't want to have a lot of menu items up here. We don't want to have the big footer and things like that. So we want to go over here into settings. And let's start with the Elementor canvas rather than the default page, because that will give us a clean slate to work with. And then what we could do is add our simple headings or add simple footers, and that'll do it pretty easy. So for the heading, let's just put a simple section up there, and then let's do a 2-column for where we'll put the donations, and then let's add a 1-column. Or let's do 3 columns for the footer, and we'll put some simple information in the bottom. So for the header, let's drop in a single column. Let's drop in a image for the logo. And let's set this to, actually let's just do, let's do 300, and let's use our logo here. Okay. Oh, I'm not liking that. So let's set this to full, and let's do it in the styling. We'll set a max width of 300 pixels, and that looks fine. Now let's put some margin on this. Let's go to the midsection. Let's give it a top margin of 100 pixels. Gives us some separation. The bottom margin is fine. Let's set the structure of this. Let's do 50% for this. Great. Now let's drop a text box down here. And this is where we're going to have our disclosure, paid for by John Smith for Judge, something to that effect. And let's go ahead and center that. And then let's put some border on this, because we want to have a 1-pixel border around, so we'll say 1 around, and that'll be our little disclosure box there. And we can put some padding on this of maybe 5 pixels. That looks great. Okay, now For the middle of the page, we had a heading up here. So let's drop a heading in, and let's drop some text underneath that. Great. And then I like to keep the call to action separate, so I'll usually drop in another piece of text below that. And usually this last one is something that's a call to action, like make your donation today, and then I usually like to bold that. And then on the right side, what we're going to do is we're going to drop in WS form. So let's do a search WS, find the form, and drop that in right there. And then it has one option, and we're just going to select the form. We are working on donation V2, and that's going to render the form out here. And there we are. Now you can see we've got some styling work to do, and that's what we're going to do right now. Now we don't have to finish the text yet, but we could put something in like, let's elect John Smith with an exclamation, and then you would want to put some standard text in here. I'm not going to go too far into the salesy text, but let's just put a couple paragraphs in there like you would try to sell the idea of making a donation, and let's update that. Great. Now this is right now just pretty plain, but let's give it a look on the front end here. We've got the logo up top. Great, not too much in terms of distractions. There's no menus to click on, there's nowhere to go. So we're in pretty good shape here. Now, if we want to make this blue like I did on the other page, then what we'll want to do is obviously use a different logo. You could obviously put an entire color on the page background or a gradient. I think I had the header was a darker blue. There was a gradient on the page slowly going into the darker blue in the footer. You can of course do that. It's very easy to change the color of this text. But let's move forward with the styling of this. So there's a couple things we want to do. One of the first things we want to do is to hide the tabs. We don't want these tabs to be visible. It gets done with the continue in the next button. So let's inspect that. So if we go and inspect these tabs, what we will see here is that's just one of the tab items. And there's the unordered list right there, and it's WSF-tabs. So if we just put this here, let's just say WSF-tabs. Didn't like that. And let's say display none. Let's put an important indicator on there, and so we can copy that. And then let's head back over to Elementor. And let's make sure that we're clicked on the form element. Head over to the Advanced tab, Custom CSS, and one of the great things about Elementor is we can use the selector term to highlight just this widget that we're working on there. And let's put our information in there. Now you may get a warning with the use of important. So you can play around with this. Generally speaking, you can leave that kind of stuff out, but you'll see here, looks okay. So let's save that. And that should update on the front end, and you'll see, great, that's gone. So we've gotten rid of that tab area. Now let's work on these buttons. Now, we did put a class of WSF-button, and that renders these buttons, but essentially what's happening with that class is it's actually hiding the radio and extending the label to be the background. So we actually don't want to target the WSF-button class. We want to target the label class. So what we're going to be looking for here is, if you want to inspect that, you'll see here the class of WSF button that we put on it, but really it's the label element that we're going after, and more particularly the WSF-label. So if we come here and say WSF-label, and then we make that with 100%, that's how we style out those buttons. So let's copy that and do the same thing like we did with this. We'll select selector, WSF label, 100%. Great. So now we've got this styled up. One of the things we're going to want to do now is to change this blue to a green highlighted color. So let's do that next. Now let's head back over to our other form just to grab the color off that button. So here we are at the form, If we check this button, then let's go ahead and inspect that, just see if we can grab that same color green. So if we look at this there, we'll see here's our background color, and here is the selector that's in place. So let's grab everything except the Elementor widget numbers, and let's just copy that. And then let's head over to back to the form we're styling here, and let's selector there. Great. Okay, so we've got this now here green, and let's just add one more item. Let's do font weight bold so that it's bold when it's selected. Great, so that looks good. And let's add a border color of the same color, just so we're not having that blue which was in the background previously. Great, so that looks good. Let's update that, take a look at that on the front end. So we've got our preview here. Click one of these buttons. Great. So it changes from, there we go. So that looks good. We've got that set. Now, let's head over to the second page and just take a look at this. So we've got our previous button. That looks a little big. Let's see if we can make that shorter. And the rest of this looks okay. These buttons are now also styled with that green, so that looks good. And the complete donation button looks good. So really the only thing we have left is maybe to work on this previous button, which of course would get done in the form itself. So we might want to change that, make that a little bit smaller. So let's work on that now. So let's head back over to the form editing. And one of the things that I really like about WS Form is that it takes this mobile first approach. So you can change the style of the form and the widths of the columns of the fields simply by moving this slider. Right now it starts off where everything is 100%, and that's for a mobile view. And as you tick over, this would be for like a tablet or iPad view. This would be a laptop view, so your 1280 by 700 or something along those lines. And then this is your monitor view and your TV or your really big monitor view. So pretty much anything bigger than those sizes. So typically for your cell phone, you're going to have this be one field, just like this is. So let's real quick look at that. So if we were to inspect this, and I'm using the Chrome browser, let's move this down a little bit, and let's use our element there to turn this into a, let's see, we've got the iPhone, let's say iPhone X, right? So this is going to have the logo in the middle. It's going to have everything in a one column view, which is really what you want, right? Looks like we have to do a little work here. So that's good that we take a look at this. And then as we go up, say, to an iPad, it's going to add that second column in, so that looks good. Still, this is in one column, which is good. Now, if we make this completely responsive, you can see everything stays in one row, or I'm sorry, one column, even as we get bigger. But we might want to change that, right? We might not want to have city, state, and zip and individual rows because it takes up a lot of space. So we can sort of constrict this form down a little bit if we make some edits here. So if we go back to the form itself, I think it's okay to leave everything for the cell phone as one column. But let's go back to the amount field first, right? So we have donation amount and we have other amount here, and these are radio buttons, and that's totally fine. So let's just, again, take a look at that on the front end, and let's look at this for, say, the iPhone X. And let's go previous. So you'll see it takes all of these and puts them in one column. So that's fine for the donation amounts. Totally works there. I think that looks great. If you click other, it drops down a big field. All that's good. But really, it's the second page and the first page when we get into some of this in a bigger scale or in a responsive area. We want this to go to have some better spacing here. So we'll go back to the form, and I think it's jump right up to the tablet view. And we have a little bit more room to work with here, right? So we can leave this front page, but where we get into the contact info, we can constrict first and last name. So all we do is just grab these and move them in. And I like to start with the one that's above first, and then we can, you'll notice this one is full width, so it doesn't pull over to this next field. But once we move that in halfway, it pops to that side. So that's great. Address 1 and 2 we can leave. City, I like to pull this in a little bit. State, we can pull that in as well. And you'll see it wraps to that. And then zip code, we can also pull in. I don't think we need zip code to be that big, so let's make state a little bit bigger. And zip code, we can, oops. We have to make it a little bit smaller. There we go. Okay. Now, they're running the checkbox for whether they're currently employed, and it should be, let's take a look at these settings here. For extra small, it was going to be 2 columns, so we'll check that out in a moment. 3 columns for the small width. We'll see how this looks when we get a little bit closer. Let's do the same thing with the address fields here. Employer name could be 1 field, employer address, that's fine. Let's move these in a little bit to match what we have above. And do the zip code. Great, and that fits. And then once you set it for that height, anything past it will maintain that same ratio. You'll see that the city, state, zip stay on 1 field. But for going back down to responsive at the mobile side, it puts it back into 1 column. So let's click Save here. Make sure that we publish this. And let's take a look at this form again. So you'll notice here it constricted down a little bit. First name, last name, email address, cell phone. The address is there. The currently employed all in one shot here. And if we click yes, that drops down as well with city, state, zip on 1 field. So perfect. So all of that looks good. Now let's double check what this looks like when we go. This is totally responsive here. Let's take a look at what happens when we move this down a little bit. So you'll see city, state, zip still look fine, still have enough room. Name, address still look good. And then when we get down to the iPad view, still looking good. And then when we get down to a cell phone view, we start to see some constriction here with the buttons for currently employed, because it's trying to maintain that smaller pill area for those buttons. So let's try to change that. And that looks like it happens somewhere around, let's see the exact pixel where that changes. Scroll down a little bit. We're still full width there at 581. So it looks like it's happening at 578, 576, that area. So to address that, we'll go back to our form, and we want to change it for this view. So this is the mobile view. And if we go into the currently employed, because that's where our radio buttons are, we'll change that here. For the extra small width, we might either make this 3 columns, or we might just say 1 column and leave it there like that. And let's save that and see how that looks. Make sure it's published to lock in those changes. And let's refresh our page. And then let's minimize this down below. So you'll see, if we refresh that just to make sure we're pulling in the most recent styling. I'm going to set this to, say, iPhone X. And you'll see here that the radio buttons are not working right there. So we're going to have to change that styling. And let's set this to, instead of 1 column, let's go to 4 columns. Same here. And let's see if this works. Should we publish that? And then let's look at our form on the front end. Great. Okay, so what that did was it wrapped that extra one to the next page, to the next row. So we may want to go even one more with it, and let's just check the settings again, just to make sure we didn't add an extra radio button. Okay, great. Okay, so we can change this. These are all set here. Let's go up one more and do 6-column width. Save that, publish it, and let's take a quick look at this. So essentially what that's doing is it's separating it out into two for us, and I actually think that looks really good. So we can leave that there. As we get down below, you'll see it keeps that same structure, which I also think looks good. And then down here looks great. So I would run with that, and that looks pretty good. And it's got our designation below and then complete donations. So I think this is in really good shape. You've hopefully by now successfully styled this form, and it's ready to roll. Now the only thing that's left to do is to hook this up to your payment processor, which would be PayPal, Stripe, or any of the other payment process that integrates with WS Form. And you can do that in directly in WS Form. They'll have an add-on that you can use depending on the version of the plugin that you have. It may be a free add-on or it may be a paid add-on. You'll have to double check the WS Form page. We'll put links to that in the description, the notes of this video. Also in the notes of this video, you will find a link to grab all of the code for the styling that I used here. Just keep in mind if you're adding additional fields or if you're adding additional classes on that, that might change or be custom for your site, but we'll put a link to that in the description as well. So thanks for joining us for this video. In the next video, we're going to cover hooking up Stripe and using that as your payment processor for the donation forms, which is a great option with this form. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next tutorial.